Music theory with Microsoft Excel. Scale degree chords versus modal chords. Spoiler alert, scale degree chords perform about as well as Joe Biden in his last presidential election, which is not good, but entertaining. We'll be looking at this time chords built off of the major modes, which includes the Ionian mode, the Lydian mode, the Mixolydian mode. So get ready and some coffee because you ain't never seen rockin' unless you excel at rockin'. And for that, yes, you do need Microsoft Excel. In Excel, if you don't have access to this workbook, that's okay because we basically built this from a blank worksheet but started in a prior presentation. So if you want to build this entire worksheet from a blank sheet, you could begin back there or just build the part of the table that we're currently working on. If you do have access to this workbook, though, 4 tabs down below, including a very colorful fretboard tab, the example tab, in essence, the answer key, the practice tab having pre-formatted cells, so you could practice the practice problem with less Excel formatting. But if you don't have any of that, that's okay because we'll continue to work in the blank tab where we started from scratch with a blank worksheet, and we'll be continuing in the blank part of the worksheet, practicing not only music skills, but Excel formatting skills as well for formatting's sake. Let's go on over to the fretboard tab to get a reminder of what we want to be doing, noting it's very colorful, but don't worry, it's not political. In a future course or section, we're going to come up with an absolute color system to name the points, which will be in notes or relative modal points, as well as distance, which will be the intervals or the modal distance. Right now, we're looking at chord creation, however. We've got the fretboard mapped out with each fret having 2 sides to it, one being that point, that being the note name or the relative position from a modal perspective, the second being the distance, which can be thought of as the intervals or the modal distance. We have the low or heavy E string on top of our fretboard, that being the one closest to the ceiling, looking at the collection of notes around the key of C major. So for example, this is the Ionian node, and we can see that on the right, we have the distance, which would be a perfect first or a 0 note away from the Ionian node, 0th modal half step. When we build a chord, the optimal way to build the chord is really to be thinking from a functional standpoint. When you're playing music on an instrument, particularly a guitar, which we're mirroring here, then what I'd like to know is what's the relative nodal position, and then how do I build a chord from that relative position, which means it would be nice to name the chord constructions from the distance per node, meaning a modal chord perspective. That also allows me to easily write my music in such a way that it will be transposable through all 12 collections of 7 notes. Now you might ask the question that what if I pick something up that's in the ocean? Does it not work if I don't have that? Yes, we can still do that. We can still pick the ones in the ocean and make it completely transferable. We'll talk more about that later. But right now, just logistically note that most chord constructions are constructed from all of the notes in the same 7-note collection. And so what we'd like to do is build those from each of the points in the position. Now note that this fretboard also allows us to see it from a different perspective, meaning if I was on the A here, or the Aeolian node, the second bit is still being measured from the Ionian node. I can toggle this over and say, now switch it to the perspective of the Aeolian, changing the second note. Notice this is still the same collection of notes. I don't want to change the Aeolian node to now be the 1 from a scale degree standpoint in order to construct a chord off of the Aeolian node. No, I want to keep it the 6. I want to still call it the Aeolian node, and therefore I'd like to call this an Aeolian chord, just measuring the distance from that modal point through the same collections of notes. So in essence, functionally what we're doing when you're playing on an instrument is typically saying, if I'm on the Aeolian, which distances do not land me in the ocean? I'm going to pick up every other note, picking those notes that don't land me in the ocean. What if I was on the Ionian? Well, I could switch this and say, give me back to the Ionian. Which distances from the Ionian under this same collection of notes will not land me in the ocean? That's basically how we're building the chords. All right, now note that if I go to the example tab here, when we build the chords, normally what we want to do is group the chords then by the node, meaning it's going to be a 3-note chord, a 4-note chord, a 5-note chord, a 6-note chord, and a 7-note chord, in essence, building from the root, which would be the Ionian, which could be any of the 12 notes that we can switch or toggle through. We will be working in the collection of notes around C major. So that's generally the way and then you would like to say, well, in the Dorian, we can have a series of chords built off of the Dorian, depending on how many notes we want in it, and so on and so forth. That would be the most functionally useful way to list the chords if you're actually building a song and playing, so that you can pick the chords that will be relevant in the key that you're playing, the collection of notes that you're working in. Now, notice that if you look up a normal chord chart, it's going to look more like this typically. So in this chord chart, you have like a major. This is a major triad, but it doesn't really tell you what nodal point it's from, because that could be a mixolydian. It could be from the nodal point of the Ionian. It could be the nodal point of the mixolydian or Lydian, right? And when I add another note, now I've got a major, but then I have a minor, and then I have the 7 chord constructions, which would be like the mixolydian. So this chart, notice this chart is not really functionally helpful to most people. It's not telling me what I want to know, really. It's condensing everything down to a small group of chords that I then have to name by the point of the letter that I'm in, the note name. But what I really want to do is name it by the relative nodal position and know the relevant chord that I would construct from each of the nodal positions in the 7-note collection. And so see how this is, again, not really functionally as clean as it could be. So what we'll do is we'll build them all out, and then we'll put them in the buckets as the normal buckets. And then we'll use that to construct this shorthand bucket list so that you can see the chords from a functional standpoint as well as how they're normally broken out. Okay, so to do that, we're going to go back to the blank tab. We started in the Ionian. So we have our list of notes. We've got our note names and our note numbers. We combined them together with a note number and a note name, sharps and flats being represented with the lowercase in between them. So this would be an A sharp or a B flat. We then listed out the pattern from the perspective of the 7-note collection derived with the formula of the major scale formula, which would be whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, to get me the 7-note collection from the perspective of the major scale. And then we numbered it like the Nashville number system or the relative scale degrees, but the scale degrees are going to remain the same for us in terms of the absolute numbers, even if we look at it from the perspective of any mode, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, and so on. And then we also gave the abbreviation for the nodes, so the letters that we're going to use for the abbreviations. We gave the intervals, so this is going to be the intervals in half steps, and we used that then to map out from the Ionian's perspective, looking at the note of a C, but also trying to map out in such a way that I can remove the C note so that I can have everything from the perspective of a relative position, telling people, look, I'm playing in the 7-note collection of the C major, and all the chords that I would build from it then are now built from that perspective, so that then if you want to transpose it, you can transpose it easily. So then we have the scale degrees, we've got the modal points, and then we've got the modal distance. So we mapped out all the different ways that you can kind of view that from that perspective. All right, so now what we want to do, I want to add the second bit, which is the buckets that we normally group into. So I'm going to make a skinny over here. I'm going to make a skinny, and I'm going to say all of these different chords that we build off of the Ionian, what bucket would they normally be in? Obviously, they're going to be in the standard major bucket, because the Ionian is the major scale that is our starting point in Western music. So that would be the bucket that would be most used. So I'm going to call it, I'm just going to put the headers, I'm going to call it the Ionian bucket, and I'm going to say this is going to be, we're going to say this will be note. I'm just going to put the headers here, number of notes. Let's go that, and then it's going to go major. So here's the buckets. So we list it into either the bucket of major, minor, so that would be, does it have a major third or minor third? But then we had to put in this dominant 7. Those are the Mixolydian ones. We had to have a whole nother category, in essence, for all the Mixolydians, because they have the minor 7 in there. And then we have a half diminished. Now this is a whole nother bucket that they had to put in place that basically takes care of all of the Locrian chords that have a flat 5 in there. And then, so you might as well just call them Locrian, right? And then we had major extension and then minor extension. So we'll talk about those, are like the ones that we had to kind of fudge a little bit to work into the system. All right, so that's going to be our normal buckets under like what you normally would see for the groupings of chords. So let's make this black, white, and centered. Okay, so then I'm going to say this equals the same number of notes. So it's a 3, it's either it starts at a 3-note chord and then it can go up to a 7-note chord. Those are the normal chords for the Ionian node, just starting with 3 and then skipping every other note, and so that you can have 7 notes that are the 7 notes in the collection, not including the 5 notes that are in the ocean, which aren't part of what you would expect would be the normal chord construction of a normally 7-note collection. Not that you can't do that, it's just that that's not the norm, that's not the most common chords. So these would be the chords that you would think you wouldn't have to do anything funny to construct them. So these will be the major chords, and again, they should fit in beautifully. So they're just going to be all of these normal chord constructions that we looked at would be what we would normally see in the major system, and they all fit in there pretty nice because that's what you would expect, because all of the chords were built first around, you know, the major chords. It's going to get messy when we add the Mixolydian, the 7 chords, and then the diminished, the Locrian. So when we look at the modes, you would expect the Ionian mode to be the cleanest under our normal current naming system. And then when you go to the other modes, like the Dorian mode, it's still relatively clean on the Dorian. But then you go to the Phrygian, it gets messy. You go to the Mixolydian, it gets messy, and so on and so forth. Locrian is a complete mess. Okay, so now let's see if I can clean up. Let's just format this Ionian a little bit better and see if I can copy it down to the other 2 major modes and see what I have to do formula-wise to make it so I can copy it down. So to do this, I'm gonna make this black and white from my header. I'm gonna make all this black and white. Let's make this black and white from my header. We'll make this black and white. Now I shouldn't need this bit over here. I'm gonna make this yellow because I'm gonna hide the cells. That just makes it a little bit easier for my formulas as opposed to pulling from up here. Why? Because when I copy this whole thing down, I don't want to make an absolute reference to this one. It would be easier to have these over here so I can copy them down. So we'll deal with that. And this is pulling from there. Okay. And so then I can take this whole thing and put brackets around this whole thing. Let's bracketize the whole thing and go to boom, brackets. Okay. And then I'm gonna put the default of this whole thing as like blue, my blue underneath. So I'm gonna hit the drop down, and I like this blue, which is under the more colors. This side, that's the blue right there. Boom. Okay. And then, is this as tight as it could be? Let's tighten this up. Let's tighten this up. Let's tighten this up. Let's tighten this up. Okay. This needs to be tightened up. This is wasted space. Wasted space around here. I will not stand for it. I'm going to sit down for, I'm not going to stand for it. Okay. And then, so then I'm going to make every other one maybe I'll make this a different color so that it'll be, so that I can see kind of it's a different range. So my other alternating color is this green right there. So I'll make it that green. I'll make this top bit black again. So I'm going to make this black and white. Okay. And then, so I've got my alternating colors of green and then back to black. So, and then blue, and then it goes from blue. Let's make this green. So alternating color system so that it's a little bit easier on the eyes. And then it goes green to black. And then let's make this green. It's kind of funny. I got the green lined up under the black instead of the green. That's okay. It's still easier on the eyes. Let's make it nice. And then over here, I'm going to make this whole thing blue. Standard color drop down, blue, bordered. All right. Okay. Looks very nice. So now, I had, all these are formulas, which I think work. I should be able to copy these down, I believe. But I'll have to check them as I copy them down. See how these are referring to something up there? That could cause me some problems when I copy it down. That could cause me problems. So it's like, how can I deal with that? If I want to copy this down, I could, instead of pulling that Ionian, I could pull it from this Ionian, but then to refer to the C, I'm not sure how I can fix the C thing. Yeah, so I'm just going to, so we're just going to have to deal with that. We'll deal with it. Deal with it. Okay. And so this should be okay. You know, I'll have to deal with that Ionian problem up top. That's okay. So, okay. Now this needs to be a formula. This is hard-coded. That's lazy. That's lazy work right there. No. 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 So there's a couple ways I could do this. I could say that this is going to be the Ionian, which is the 1, and then I'm adding the distance to get to the 5, to the end of the range. So this is our modal range chord. But I mapped out the modal range over here. See? So this is like, this is going from the 1 to the 5 modal range, or an I to an X. So all I have to do, I have to construct this first, and then I can reconstruct this. So this would be better to pull a formula up. It's just going to be equals this, and then I'm going to say and. Well, let's do it over here. I'm just going to do it right here. I'm going to say, let's do it here. This is going to be equal to this, and then and then I want a dash. So I'm going to type that in with a quotes, and then dash, end quotes, and then and, tying that into the end bit. There's my range. And then I'm going to add a C to it. So then I'm going to say and quotes, so I can type a C. So it's a modal range chord. So it's a 6/5 modal range chord. 6/5 modal range chord. Now, I can do the same thing down here, but I have to change it because this has the different endpoint. So this one has a different endpoint. This one needs to be to the 7. Okay, and then I can copy this down here, but it has a different endpoint. This needs to be to the 2. Oh, dude. Dude. This needs to be to the 2. Okay, and then I can copy this down, double click. This endpoint needs to change to the 4, and then double click, and this endpoint needs to change to the 6. All right, move B to the N. Same thing here. I could say this is going to be an IX chord. So I want to say this is going to be equal to, I can just pull this I, and then I don't even need a space or anything. I'm just going to pick the endpoint, that, and then and I'm going to put quotes C to show that it's a chord. Then I can copy this bad doggy down, dude. So if I double click on this one, then this is going to be the end. This has a new endpoint. So it's an Ionian Locrian chord. This is going to be an Ionian to the Dorian chord. And this one's going to be an Ionian to the Lydian chord, and this one's going to be an ion to the Aeolian chord. All right, that's cool. Now I'm wondering on these, like the ones that are referring up here, I've already copied them down. So maybe I just get rid of the absolute references altogether now, and that way when I copy it down, then all the relative positions should move down properly, I'm thinking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to F4, get rid of all the dollar signs. Get rid of all the dollar signs, because that'll make it easier when I copy it down. Let's think I'm 5 steps ahead. We're playing, this ain't checkers right here. This is, checkers is hard. No, but yeah, but we're thinking like 5 steps ahead with like chess. In chess. You can't think that far ahead in chess because there's too many. Shut up. We're thinking way ahead. Okay. It's going to make it way easier in the long run if we do this. I'm just going to get rid of all the absolutizing. And this is going to trim down. Seems awfully are you sure this is faster? This is faster. I wonder if I could copy and paste it without the absolutes. Can you do that? I don't think so. If you just say, how can I copy and paste without the absolutes? All right, I think that's good. And then this is good. Everything else, nothing else is referring to that I. Is this I being referred to anywhere? Let's check it this way. By the way, these little line things are under the, I put them in that area so I can get to them fast, but they're over here under the data sort. So then I want to say, is anything referring to this? All of these are referring to that I, but it's not absolute. So these are not absolute. So that's cool. And then all of these are referring to that I. Okay, so I need to do the same thing with all of these. I'm going to get rid of the absolute values so that all of the relative positions will copy down. Hopefully this makes sense. Get rid of the absolutes. Dollar signs, be gone. Be gone! Dollar signs. Okay. Your purpose has been served. And now you will be banished from the formulae. You don't have to be mean about it. They did a good job. Okay. You have to be harsh or you won't be able to get them out of there. They won't leave. They won't go unless you tell them with authority. Be gone! Dollar signs. Okay. So we'll remove these. Alright. Get those out. Did I do all those? This one. It's going to mess it up if you don't get them all out of there. Then the whole thing will be for naught. For naught. You missed one. Okay. Don't make it for naught. Alright, and then do that. That. And then I think we're going to have to do the same thing for the C. Did I get them? Yeah, okay. And then this one. Hopefully this makes sense. It's going to be a big waste of time if this does not work. We're taking an awful risk here. This had better work. Okay. it's going to work. It's not really risky. What are you talking about? This is not an awful risk. Okay. And then here, this one's referring to the C. So again, I think I can remove the $ here and here. And that will make it easier here. And then these are still cool. I need those because that's the ranges. It's just the ones, because this one's referring to the C, I believe, right? This one's referring to the, no, maybe not. Maybe not. Let's undo that. Wait a second. Don't be too hasty. Oh, no. Okay, that's okay. I'm going to put that back for now. Let's put that back for now. And think about this for a second. Because I was assuming that this is referring to this C, but it's not. That's why I put the 4s here. That's why I put the 4s here. So I could have referred to this C and then removed all of the $. But I don't need to. That's why I put the 4 here. Okay. I remember now. Okay, so let's try to copy this down now. Let's copy this bad doggy. And then just change what we need to make it go from the Ionian to the next major mode, which is the Lydian. So we'll just copy this whole thing down. I'm going to copy that and put that down here. Boom. All right. So now this needs to be, okay, so then I'm just going to change this bit. Now to spell it right, I'm just going to say this equals, and we should be on the Lydian now. This equals the Lydian. And then the note that we're on, I want to put them all relative to this 4. So I'm going to make this one black because I'm not going to really adjust it. We could adjust that one, but I want to make everything relative to the Ionian as the default. So I just changed this one number and all the rest of them will change to the relative positions. And then if I want to, I can adjust this one if I need to. So that would make this the 9, which is an F, because the F is relative. Now, I can figure that out distance-wise because if I go from the Ionian to the Lydian, that's going to be then going 7 notes away, right? So so we're going to go, so this is going to be equal to this plus 7, which gets me to the 11, Let's make this a little bit larger because that changed all these yellow notes on the side. That's fine. Now the problem is that it's possible, like if I change this to an 11, then this goes to 18. I don't want it to go over the number of notes in the local distance, which is 12, because we have a number. So what I need to do is say, okay, I'm going to go in front of this and say if tab this bit copy Control C is less than 13, meaning it's 12 or lower, then do that. But if not, comma, do that minus 12. Close it up, boom. So that brings it into 6. So if I change this back to 4, we're back to 11. And if I change this to something higher, like I'm on 11, G, Ionian, then it would be a D, Mixolydian, a D Lydian. Okay, let's bring this back to 4 and see if everything else populated as it should. So now we have so now for the Mixolydian, which is a major mode, we can have a 3-note chord. The 3-note chord could be a Lydian G2 modal whole step chord, which would be a 3-note Lydian chord. You can call it that. Or you can remove the G, which is what I would recommend to do, and just say, hey, look, I'm in the 7-note collection that I usually define based on the major scale, meaning the C major 7-note collection, and I'm playing then a Lydian 2 modal half-step chord, meaning I'm going up, I'm starting on the Lydian, and you go up 2 modal whole steps, which would be 4 modal half steps, or to get to the end of the range, which would be the 5th scale degree. You can capitalize the Y if you want to say, and I still would say that the optimal way to name this would be like, I'm in the 7-note collection that we usually construct from the position of the major scale. So a 7-note collection around the C major, but I'm making the Lydian the tonic, the root of that 7-note collection. I can indicate that by making it a capital Y, so that that's a capital chord. So I don't even have to tell someone, hey, look, I'm in the Lydian mode. I'm just going to say, look, I'm in the same, just like the Nashville number system does, collection of 7 notes that we see constructed off of the key of C typically. And then I can indicate that the tonic is the Lydian node by capitalizing the Y, right? And that would be, I think that would be the most efficient way. Or you can say it by range. So it's going to be a modal range of a 1-5. Now this 1-5, I can delete this now because I repeated this. I'm going to delete this whole column. That column, I don't need it no more, because now it's going to be, this column is now with a formula. So it's a 4-1 modal range chord, otherwise known as a YI modal range chord, because if we map this out, you're going to end up at the endpoints of the Lydian to the Ionian, and you just take every other modal half step in between, which would be Lydian, Aeolian, Ionian. So it looks like it mapped out all of that correctly. If I had a 7-note chord, it would be a Lydian G6 modal whole step, or it would be a 7-note Lydian chord, or it would be a Lydian 6 modal whole step, dropping the G entirely so that it would be easily transferable or transposable. You can make it the root with a capital Lydian 6 modal whole step chords. You can name it by modal distance, meaning it's a 4-2 modal range chord, meaning we're going from the Lydian to the Dorian, which would be a YD or Lydian Dorian modal range chord, which means you start at the Lydian and you take every other modal half step, which is the definition of every modal whole step from there, which would leave you with the points of Lydian, Aeolian, Ionian, Phrygian, Mixolydian, Locrian, and Dorian. You just take every other note in the collection of 7 notes starting from the point of the Lydian. So then that would give us the note half steps. So now we have the number of notes from a distance standpoint. So that would be, the distance away would be 0 notes away if you're on the tonic. And then we have the second modal half step, which is the 3rd scale degree, is what we would call the major 3rd. But it's 4 notes away is the important thing. 7 notes away would be the perfect 5th. 11 notes away for the Lydian is going to be the problem 1, because that would be the one. Wait, is that right? So it's a 7, 11 note away 7th. Yeah, that would be a major 7. And then the 9 is 2 away. Note half step distance would be 2, or 2 plus 12 would be 14. So this would be the local distance. And then 11, 6, and then the 9 is equivalent to the 13. All right. And then if I look at the interval distances, it would be a perfect 1st, a 4 note away major 3rd, a 7 note away perfect 5th, an 11 note away major 7, a 2 note away major 2nd, and then here's the funny one, the 6 note away diminished 5th. It should be augmented 4th, but I'm just using one absolute naming convention for that 6 note away distance. So that one, maybe I should make that red to indicate that that's the one where you have the double naming convention, and it should be the 4th, but I don't want to get too crazy with that particular formula because it causes all kinds of more problems than I think it solves from an Excel standpoint, although maybe I'll do that later. But anyways, so then from a modal distance, I would rather say it has a 0 note away from the Lydian 0 modal half step. It's got a 4 note away from the Lydian second modal second modal half step, which would be the third, right, scale degree. 7 note away from the Lydian, which would be 4 modal half step, which would be the 5th scale degree. 7 note away from the Lydian. 6 modal half step, which would be the 7th scale degree. And then 2 note away from the Lydian. 8th modal half step, which would be 8 plus 7 if you wanted to get an octave up, right? Is that right? 8 modal half step. Well, let's not get too crazy. And then it'd be a 6 note away from the Lydian. 10 modal half step, which would be the 11th scale degree. 9 note away from the Lydian. 12 modal half step, which would be the 13th scale degree. So in other words, here I'm going to keep on going up linearly. Whereas when we look at the scale degrees, it's kind of messy because the scale degree only has 7 notes in it. So when you go up another scale degree and get to the 9, it's a little bit weird. But if you think about it from a distance standpoint, it kind of makes sense. Anyway, so then over here, we're going to say the notes, then this will convert it to the notes. So if I was in the G, these are the notes. But of course, that will be adjusted if I change that one cell from a C to anything else. So this is the one which will change and give us the note point, but I'd like to have all of the relative positions lined up. That would be the easiest thing. So now let's copy this over into our bucket thing. I'm just changing my worksheet up top. So let's add this same thing over here and say now copy this and put this down here for my buckets, but this time I'm looking at this should be equal to, let's do this with a formula to make it as efficient as possible. This should be coming from the Ionian, which means that if I copy this and put it here, it should be the Lydian. So from the Lydian's perspective, we're not grabbing these on the major. The Lydian is going to be, well, some of them are going to be here. So this is going to be equal to, and I'll pull this on over for the Lydian. Now, wait a sec. These are still showing C's. This is a problem. ¿Qué está pasando aquí? ¿Qué está pasando? Okay, so then I should have changed. See, I didn't change. See how this, I have absolute references here. So let's, like if I removed those and then copy it down, I'm going to F4, eliminating the $sign, and then I'll recopy it down. I think that's the most efficient thing to do. The absolute references snuck in there when I was trying to remove them so that we can then copy and paste them down here. So then it does what we expect. So now it's a G major 7, G major 9, G major 11, and G major 13. Now, the problem is that this gets messed up. These last two get messed up under the normal naming convention. So there's nothing to do. I mean, I could try a formula to fix that, but you kind of have to type. Wait, not those two. And this shouldn't be a G. This should be the Lydian. This should be a 9. This should be a 9. Let me fix this. Sorry about that. This should be going up 5 to make it a 9. All these 7s need to be a 5. I was thinking I was in the Mixolydian for a second. There, it goes up to 9. Okay, so it should be an F major, and then an F major 7, and then an F major 9, but then these two get messed up. These two get messed up under the normal naming convention, and this, I believe, needs to be an F major, and then it's an F major, and then it has a sharp 11. So the 11 is going to be right, because that's the one which is the augmented 6 note away augmented. And so this one is going to have a 13, but we also need to say that it's going to have and then we're going to put brackets put brackets, a sharp 11 in the brackets. So again, this is the area where the normal naming convention kind of falls apart, because it's like you would expect that you shouldn't have to do that because these are ugly looking chords names, and you haven't gone outside of the normal 7 notes. So why should you have an ugly name unless you're including a note in the ocean? That's how I feel about it. So that's why. Okay, so now if we fit these into the buckets, if I fit these into my buckets over here, these, by the way, are now all Fs. Now we still have a problem because something is wrong here still. All right, I'm gonna have to fix that one thing at a time. I'm gonna say that these, let's copy these down. So you have an F major, a 4-note chord, F major 7. You add the 7 because it's a major 7 for Lydian. A 9-note chord is an F major 9, right? But then over here, you have to, let's copy these down and then I'll move them. Over here, these two, I've got to move these. I'm going to cut them and say those are going to have to go into this adjusted category over here of a major extension, meaning we had to do an extension to make these work. So I'm going to make these red. This is where the current system kind of falls apart, in my opinion, more because it doesn't tell you functionally where you're at, and kind of it falls apart because you have to put them over on the side here. So it's kind of messy. Okay, so that's that. Now what is going on here? Because are these right? No, these are right. Yeah, these are right. I got worried for a second. Okay, I think everything works then. So I think everything works now. Let's copy it down to the Mixolydian this time. Let's copy it down to the Mixolydian. We're running long on time. Let's copy this whole bad doggy down, dude. Dishes are done, dude. Let's copy this down and paste it here. Okay, so this is going to be, I want the Mixolydian. Let's just pull out so I don't misspell it, Mixolydian. And then, if I look at it, this is the one that needs to be the G. So I'm going to look at it from the perspective of this 4, and it needs to go up to a G, which is an 11. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 is up 7. So it's going to be equal to the 4 plus 7. But wait, so let's undo that. It needs to be, here's the if formula. Let's just do it again. So this is going to be the 4 plus 7. But then, what if this number, once again, was an 11? Then that's 18. I need to have 18 minus 12. So I'm going to do the if thing again. So it's going to be if tab, and then I'll copy this, copy. If that is less than 13, then do that. But if not, comma, that minus 12, boom, 6. There we go. So I think that's right. Because then if I bring this back down to 4, then that's going to be 11. All right, MUI B to the N. And why is this no? That's right. That's right. Okay. So if I was on the Mixolydian, the point is, if I was on the Mixolydian and I had a 3-note chord, it would be a Mixolydian G2. I know I said this whole thing with a G up here like it was a Lydian G, which is fine. You can look at it from that perspective, but let's look at it from the same collection of notes around the key of C. So now you have the Mixolydian G2, which would be a 3-note Mixolydian. It would be a Mixolydian 2 modal whole step chord, or if I want to make it the root, it's a capital Mixolydian 2, again with the same idea of the 7-note collection around the key of C, and it would be a 5-2 from a modal range, which is an XD modal range chord. Okay, so let's get this right. So now it would still be a G major, but everything from the 7 up becomes a problem, and they basically made a whole nother term for it, which is because now we want a minor 7. It's a major chord with a minor 7. So it's going to be a G7, and this would be a G9, and then a G11, and a G13. So all of these have now fallen out of the normal major minor naming convention, and we've basically made up another convention, which you might as well just call them a Mixolydian modal chord. And then the points would here, if you made a 7-note chord, Mixolydian, Locrian, Dorian, Lydian, Aeolian, Ionian, Phrygian. So the modal half steps would be here. And then let's make this not red. On this one, not red. And it would be a perfect first, a 4-note, then up 2 would be 4-note away major third, up 2 would be a 7-note away perfect fifth, up 2 would be a 10-note away minor 7 for the Mixolydian, which is the interval that's different from the major to the, and then it would be a 2-note away major second, which you might call a 9th from a scale degree standpoint, and then a 5-note away perfect fourth, which you might call an 11th from a scale degree standpoint, which means it wouldn't be just 5, but 5 plus 12, right? 5, 6, 17 notes away, but that's going around in a circle or in a note number line. 9-note away major 6, which you might call a major 13, right? And then from a modal distance standpoint, it would be a 0-note away from the Mixolydian 0 modal half step. It would be a 4-note away if you go up 2, 4-note away from the Mixolydian 2 modal half step. And then if you skip 2, it would be skip 1, it would be 7-note away from the Mixolydian 4 modal half step. And then if you skip 1, 10 notes away, once again, that's the one that's a minor instead of a major. It's different from the major distance, which would be 11 notes away from the Mixolydian 6 modal half step, and then a 2-note away from the Mixolydian 8 modal half step, meaning the 2 is the local distance again. So 2 plus 12 would be 14, and then 5 notes away from the Mixolydian, which would be 10 modal half steps up, which would be again 15 plus 12 if you want to add an octave, and so on. And then the notes, I believe these notes are proper. So let's see if I can copy this thing down again and put all the Mixolydian ones in the proper bucket from the perspective of our normal naming convention. So let's start them out as though they're all in the major. What happened here? How is this all off by 1? This is going to be equal to 3. Hold on a sec. Undo, 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 undo. This, I missed the line. Copy this whole thing. Okay, paso. All right. So now, let's put these in the proper bucket. These need to be cut and paste over here, and these need to be cut and paste over here. And then I'll just make this blue and bordered again. So now this is filling this whole column. So again, the triad is normal for all majors, for the majors, meaning the Ionian, a chord built from the Ionian, a chord built from the Lydian, and a chord built from the Mixolydian. But when you go to a Mixolydian and add the 7, that's when you get the interval that messes everything up. And that means everything after it is messed up to the point where you might as well just give it a different name, which you might as well just call it a Mixolydian chord, but they didn't. They just called it a G7 or the note, and then just the number of the interval, which is the last interval, which is just indicates that you're going to include the range or the first point to that last scale degree. And also that convention just means that you're going to have a flat 7 or a minor 7. All right. So again, it's so messy that you might as well have just named the chord off of the Mixolydian mode. And then you don't need the note at all, right? Then it would be way easier. Okay, so then that's what I think. So those are those. So hopefully I got that right. I might have to, I know I built that kind of quick. I'm trying to keep it under like an hour here, But, and I know I messed this one up a bit, but, and when I said it, but I think it's right now. So next time we'll go to the minor modes and maybe the Locrian mode or then the Locrian mode. But it should be easy to copy and paste even to the minors now if I don't mess it up.